All right. Well, we will get started. Thanks everyone for joining us for our first Talk for the Animals event of 2023. For those of you that I have not met in person, my name is Natalie Spencer and I'm our Director of Operations with Hawaiian Humane. I have several of our other team members on the Zoom call with us today, and we appreciate your flexibility. We had wished to be able to do this in person, but that was not in the cards today, so we're making it work. And we are just so excited to see so many of you join us for this very important Talk for the Animals. And I would like to introduce Marissa Martino, who is our really amazing behavior consultant that we've been working with for many months now, since May of 2022. And she's helping us with a lot of different projects and work and processes that are really already improving the lives of the animals in our care and our staff, but we'll continue to do so. So without further ado, I do want to introduce Marissa and just a really quick detail. So we will open up the Q&A portion at the end of this presentation, which you'll be able to go ahead and chat your questions in the Q&A module. So we'll let you know when that is open and available. And that way we can moderate the questions and make sure we have enough time to get to as many as possible. We are recording this session as well, so we can go ahead and share that with others who weren't able to join us today. So if you do not want to be recorded for whatever reason, now's your time to get off the call because we will be recording the whole session. So yeah, let me turn it over to Marissa, and thanks everyone again for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. Yes, I am sorry that we are not in person. I am feeling pretty sick. And so we have decided to lean into our friendly friend Zoom and still provide you with this opportunity tonight. So thank you for being flexible. And yeah, so as Natalie said, my name is Marissa Martino. I'm a certified dog behavior consultant through the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants. And I have been working in animal sheltering for the past 15 years. So I've either been a part of a behavior team or I've managed a behavior team. And just in the last year, I stepped away and am not part of a facility, but am consulting for a variety of shelters. My latest role at the Dumb Friends League in Denver, Colorado, had me for the last few years traveling around the state of Colorado, doing consulting with a variety of shelters, from really small shelters in rural Colorado to really large shelters that have had a variety of resources. So I love working with organizations and meeting them where they are and being able to provide them with support regarding animals behaviorally. So I'll be talking a little bit about the work I've been doing with Hawaiian Humane and the work that we plan to do moving forward throughout this presentation. But yes, we have been working together since May of 2022, which is, I can't believe that's almost coming up on a year. And what's exciting about this trip is that we are launching a variety of new tools and standard operating procedures and new processes to support the animals in care. And I'll be talking a little bit about that tonight. My background is besides sheltering, I also run my own private practice. And so I see clients for canine companions. So I primarily focus on reactivity. So reactivity towards people and or dogs. And so it's really cool that I have this sort of lens of like what it takes to get the animal through a facility, but then also what happens from a behavior perspective and behavior modification plan to support that animal once that animal is in the adopter's home. And then my lens, the way that I'm looking at behavior through the lens of applied behavior analysis, and I'm looking at it through evidence and science-based and ethical-based training. So if you've heard of like positive reinforcement or force-free training methods, though that is the the training philosophy that I subscribe to, because it is rooted in science and it has the least amount of fallout when we're working with our animals, because we're motivating them to do behaviors that we want versus punishing them for behaviors that we don't want. So yes, it's a little bit about me and the lens that I'm looking at all of this through. So tonight, we really wanted to just set the stage that, you know, our expectation for tonight is to be able to give you as much information about what leadership and I have been doing over the past few months and what we are hoping to launch moving forward. We're also here tonight to talk about sort of the trends in animal welfare and how that pertains to Hawaiian Humane Society. And we really just want to make sure that that tonight's really rooted in when you're asking questions and when you're talking to us about these topics, that it is really rooted in the lens that we're all doing the best that we can, and that we are here to support the animals. We all operate under the same assumption. Like we are all here to support the animals. We may not agree on all the same things because sheltering and our resources and things are very fluid. However, the intention is that we want to support the animals as best we can. So that's our behavior expectation for the evening. Then we're going to talk a little bit about socially conscious sheltering, what our behavior support process has looked like, and then define what it means to get an animal from intake to outcome. So socially conscious sheltering is a movement that started in the state that I live in Colorado. There was 4 executive directors of large shelters in the state that decided to meet. And their goal was really, how can we develop language that is articulating all of the nuanced programs and animal welfare efforts that we're making to support the animals in care and our community members. Some of you may know that there is a term called live release rate, and that live release rate is basically the number or the percentage of your live outcomes of animals that leave the facility. And what these leaders were concerned about is that when you just bottom line an organization to be a number, it doesn't take into consideration all the nuanced differences between the population of animals, the number of resources, the number of donors, the community that organization is serving. And so they really wanted to have this broader language or broader framework to be able to say, we as an organization believe in these 8 tenets, and I'll go through them. We as an organization believe in these 8 tenets, and the expression of these 8 tenets are going to look different than our neighboring organization or an organization in the next state or the next island here, right? They're going to look different because our community and our resources and our animals are different. And that to me is a more inclusive framework than just bottom lining all of your efforts to one number. Having a higher live release rate, like we want to make sure that we're trying all that we can and we're placing as many animals as possible. And there's a lot of factors that might edit that number. And so we really wanted a language and framework to be able to talk about all the nuanced areas of animal sheltering, because it's not black and white. Which can be really uncomfortable because we as humans, we want things to be organized and categorized and black and white and really predictable. And sheltering is not that, right? Especially when we're dealing with an open admission shelter like Hawaiian Humane, where we're accepting as many animals like we're not saying no to any animals. We need to help the community and those animals. And so that can really fluctuate the type of population, and it can also fluctuate our resources, kennel space, all of that. So sheltering is the last thing from black and white. It is very gray, and that can make some of us feel uncomfortable at times. So the 8 tenets of socially conscious sheltering include, number 1 is ensuring every unwanted or homeless pet has a safe place to go for shelter and care. And I would argue that Hawaiian Humane is the place to ensure that every unwanted or homeless pet has a safe place to go. In general, this organization is open admissions. Right now, you're managing the admissions by having appointment-based intakes so that we can control the flow of animals that are coming through the facility so that we could meet the needs of everybody individually and be able to ask the community to put a pause or hold their animal for a specific period of time. Unless it's an emergency, then Hawaiian Humane is going to take that animal in. But this is such a great effort we're ensuring that those animals have a soft place to land by asking the owner to keep them. We're creating space for the strays that we're contracted to bring in. And then again, we're taking in emergencies. So we're still ensuring that every unwanted or homeless pet has a safe place to go. It's just in a different procedure right now so that we can manage that intake of animals. So again, those animals are receiving the best medical and behavioral treatment, and the staff and volunteers aren't burnt out by the sheer volume of animals that are coming in. The second tenet is that we're placing every healthy and safe animal so that we are taking all the animals' medical and behavioral needs into consideration, and that we are making sure that if an animal is deemed healthy or if an animal is deemed safe, then we are making sure that we are placing that animal, whether that is transfer, whether that is a foster-based rescue, whether that is adoptions, whether that is this amazing Couch Crashers program that is really getting animals out of the building, and then people are adopting because they're going on a few first dates with that animal and actually and saying, oh wait, I actually want you to stay. So there's a lot of efforts being made to place every healthy and safe animal. The third tenet is assessing the medical and behavioral needs of homeless animals to ensure these needs are thoughtfully addressed. And I have had the privilege all last week before my voice turned into this, of shadowing the teams. Not only was I virtually working with the teams to understand all of the procedures and processes that are in place to support the medical and behavioral needs, but then I got to see it on site, which was really, really great to really put all of the pieces together. And I can assure you that there are so many plans in place and procedures in place to support these animals so that they are getting their needs met as best as we can, knowing that resources are finite. And you know, we also want to make sure that we're taking every animal as an individual and assessing their individual needs and making sure that we get access to the resources as best we can to meet their needs. The next tenet is alleviating suffering and making appropriate euthanasia decisions. I think this tenet is really important to call out because none of us, including everybody that works in sheltering, want to get into sheltering because we want to make euthanasia decisions or perform euthanasia. Like that's not like I've interviewed many shelters, I've interviewed many staff. Nobody is like, oh, well, that's actually why I'm here. Everybody wants to prevent this as an outcome, and yet it's an outcome. And I think that's so important for all of us to be able to understand and hold with that mindset that euthanasia is an outcome, and most of us do not like to make that outcome or perform that outcome. However, it is an outcome because it can alleviate a lot of suffering for animals that are struggling behaviorally or medically. I think medically is a lot easier for people to wrap their heads around, but mental suffering is also real as well, especially if we don't have the resources currently to support that animal. So I appreciate that this tenet is here because it just names something that's uncomfortable for us to talk about in sheltering. And yet we do need to hold space for it because it is an outcome. The next tenet is aligning policy with the needs of the community. And this is all about listening to the community and making pivots and changing your policy or a procedure to meet the needs of that community. So an example of this is when you all changed from intaking feral cats into the shelter, and you sort of diverted the public over to the spay neuter clinic and had them perform the surgery and all that was needed to be done to then TNR or trap, neuter, and release that cat back into the community. So to me, this makes sense, right? We need to address that there is a feral cat problem pretty much everywhere. And we need to make sure that their medical needs are met and they're not procreating. And instead of bringing them into the shelter and holding them in such a stressful environment, we're just diverting them to get their needs met and then send them back out to the community where they really need to go back out. Because the more we remove cats from the community, then we open up an opportunity for a resource opportunity for other cats to come in. So removing them is never the option. Truly, it is spaying and neutering, ear tipping, vaccinating, all of those things, sending them back out as healthy as possible, so that they stop procreating. So that is TNR programs are, even though they can be sort of like, well, I just want to get rid of the cats out of my backyard. Like, I so hear and understand that some people want that. And research has proven that that does not solve the issue. We do need to TNR them. The next tenet is enhancing the human-animal bond through thoughtful placements and post-adoption support. I will definitely say that after shadowing adoptions, I was so impressed with adoptions this week, and impressed with the volunteers that were a part of that process. Just really being so considerate about what the patron is looking for, and modifying the meet and greet based off of the animal's behavior and the animal's response to the patron and what the patron needs. Like, I really thought that there was so much paying attention to both parties involved, which is so great. And we all know that we can try our best through adoption counseling, and we can try to make the most thoughtful placements, and animals come back to no fault of really anyone sometimes. And that should be looked at or viewed upon as we got the animal out of the facility and we gathered more information about that animal behaviorally that we could use moving forward. The second to last tenet is implementing inclusive policies and practices. So this means within your four walls. So making sure that we have inclusive policies and practices for staff and volunteers, making sure that everyone's represented. And then it is also making sure that we are addressing the needs of the community, not just the ones that we see or hear about, but that we're taking a look at all different parties within the community. And then lastly is fostering a culture of transparency, ethical decision-making, mutual respect, continual learning, and collaboration. Like I said, sheltering is an emotionally charged space. We are all here because we love this work. We love supporting the animals. We love supporting the people. And this is, we're not selling t-shirts, right? Like we are supporting sentient beings, both each other as staff and volunteers, but also the animals in care, and also the patrons that we are meeting with and supporting. And so we really want to make sure that we are collaborating, we are self-regulating, we are checking in when we're feeling over emotional thresholds. We're assuming the best intent about somebody else. We are asking questions, being curious, and talking to one another through the lens of collaboration versus judgment. So as a socially conscious sheltering organization, Hawaii Humane has said, yes, we believe in those 8 tenets. That is a framework that we aspire to live by. The expression of each tenet may look different depending on our resources, depending on the month, depending on anything really, but it is a framework that Hawaiian Humane is saying, yes, that's what we want to aspire. So next, I want to talk a little bit about behavioral and medical wellness, because as I mentioned, that's one of the 8 tenets. And Hawaiian Humane is committed to supporting the behavioral wellness of all the animals in care. And we're doing that in a variety of different ways. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But the reason why we are prioritizing this is because it's our responsibility as an organization. When we prioritize the emotional well-being of the animals in care, we are potentially decreasing their length of stay. We're making them more adoptable. When we are monitoring, making notes, implementing interventions, when we're supporting these animals, we are, again, hopefully decreasing that length of stay, which is reducing the disease risk. The longer that they're in a shelter, the higher they are to exposure to disease. And then if we're prioritizing every individual animal's emotional wellness, then we're preventing things like emotional contagion. So emotional contagion is something that happens between us humans, but also with animals, where if I'm in a good mood and I walk into a room and there's several people not in a good mood and feeling really lousy or angry, I can start to feel those same emotions evoked in me as well. And on the flip side, right? If I'm in a bad mood and then I come into a room and everyone's jolly and laughing, I might start to feel that emotion as well. And so we see this all the time with like the cats that are hiding in the back together, or the dog that starts barking and then all of a sudden everybody is barking, right? And so we want to be really mindful that emotional contagion is real. So even if that dog in the second kennel was not stressed, now he is, because the dog in the first kennel is. So we really, it's important for us to prioritize monitoring and intervening when animals are experiencing stress, especially because none of us, staff, volunteers, patrons, nobody really wants to observe or sit with an animal that is experiencing stress. And so it's less strain on staff and volunteers when we really prioritize this. One of the other frameworks that is really common in our industry is the 5 freedoms. And so this was designed in agriculture to make sure that animals were given humane treatment, and there was an effort to remove anything that was causing discomfort or hunger or pain or fear. And we adopted this in animal sheltering as well as a framework to really strive for. But the problem with the 5 freedoms is that no shelter I've ever been to has ever really achieved the 5 freedoms. Like it's, when we're asking somebody to say free from, that's really hard, especially given the environment that we are living in. And so what we are moving more towards now is the 5 domains. And what the 5 domains is, David Meller is sort of inviting us to really not only remove things that are causing stress, but add positive experiences to increase that animal's welfare and increase their positive experience wherever they're being housed. So we're really marrying both of these frameworks. And so an example of this is if I were to look at a dog through the lens of the 5 freedoms, the definition for freedom to express normal behavior is providing sufficient space, proper facility, and a company of the animal's own kind. It's pretty vague, and it doesn't really get to the individual animal's needs. Because let's say this animal wants to be kenneled alone, right? They actually have a history of resource guarding towards other animals in the house. They don't want to be housed with an animal of their own kind. So what we decide to do instead from the lens of the 5 domains is we are housing in a real life room or a larger space. We're kenneling alone because we have taken a solid behavior history and we've decided that's the better option for this animal. And then we are providing social interactions with humans and providing species typical enrichment for that animal. So you see the difference between where, like, to just remove something's not enough. We need to add more positive experiences that are specific to that animal. Cat example is if we were to look at it through the lens of freedom from fear or distress, the definition of this is by ensuring conditions and treatment which avoid mental suffering. That's really stinking hard in a shelter. I don't care how many resources you have. I don't care how many staff and volunteers you have. It's really, really hard. We're in institutional housing, and they're in the kennel a lot of the time. And so there's definitely going to be mental suffering. So how can we combat that? How can we provide the animal with quiet housing or designated specific handlers to support that animal that are trained on how to provide choice-based interactions? Or how can we offer play therapy or cat-specific enrichment? Okay. So the next thing we want to talk about before we, I've alluded to this somewhat, but it's been challenging in sheltering the past few years, to say the least. I would say it's been challenging as a human being the past few years. Before COVID, there were statewide in Colorado that I'm most familiar, but they're also nationwide. Like the East Coast was concerned that they didn't have any animals. Like there were no owner surrenders coming in, barely any strays. They constantly had to transfer up from the South. And they were like having brainstorm meetings with leaders in the industry going, where are we going to get animals from? Right? Could you imagine having that problem? And then out in the West Coast, similar, like we were transferring in a lot from Texas, Oklahoma, those areas to Colorado. Texas was going all the way up to Washington, which is like a really insane transfer. And we had a lot of adopters that are willing to take on behavior challenges that as a behavior professional, I was like, I wouldn't live with that. Like we had a lot of resources before COVID, and COVID has thrown a wrench in everything, right? It's sort of thrown a wrench in a lot of different areas, and it has really shown a light, really stark light in a lot of not only just the challenges within sheltering, but also the human services challenges, because all of these animal challenges are really usually rooted in human service challenges. And that's where we were going as an industry, was really teaming up with mental health professionals, housing coalitions, social workers, like really trying to say, okay, how do we help the root of the issue to support the person? And that way, then the animal will get supported. So instead of always supporting from, we'll take your animal and then you can just deal with your problems on your own, and then we'll adopt it out to somebody else that can do it. We were really switching gears to like, no, what can we do to help maintain this human animal bond? And we're still doing all of those things in the industry. And it came to a little bit of a halt because resources were limited, and the need for human service resources has really exploded since COVID. I mean, it was already a problem, and now it is a pretty significant problem. We had seen a demand for vet services. Maybe some of you have been on your, like, I know for me, it was like 2-3 months out to get a vet clinic appointment for my own animal. We just sort of, like, the demand and the need is so great and the resources are finite, which is, again, this really uncomfortable thing that we need to look at and acknowledge in sheltering and in life, period. And so it's been really hard. My heart has gone out to anyone that has been in some sort of human service or animal service field working during this time, especially all of you that have supported Hawaiian Humane during that, and the staff. We've seen a significant amount of turnover in animal sheltering all across the country. We like mass exodus of staff. And so all of that is going to really create an environment where everyone's trying the best they can with the finite resources that they have, and it's burnout, right? And not to mention, and again, this is not the Debbie Downer portion, but it is definitely the realistic part of this conversation. All of this stuff leads to significant burnout, and I have witnessed that over and over and over again in all of the shelters that I have either worked for or worked with. And so it has been challenging, and we want to bring this to your attention just so that you're aware of where staff and where this organization has been the past few years. And this organization has also been working really hard, which is part of the work that we've done together, on rebuilding a lot of these programs, making sure that we have a really solid foundation before we add any other programs on top. And I have to say that is so smart. I see so many, and have worked with so many shelters that are constantly like shiny object and adding programs and chasing the next big thing, and then creating a lot of burnout underneath. And so this organization has really decided to take a step back and say, wow, we are taking a realistic viewpoint that resources fluctuate. This has been a challenging few years. How can we set a really solid foundation, knowing that we've been through so much change, that foundation will help hold us when we move forward, right? So like the other night when we had the volunteer training, so many great questions were asked, like, well, what about this program? And can we do this program? And it's like, yes, all of that is so great. And we need to sort of walk before we can run, because this is my old mentor, previous Dumb Friends League president, Bob Rohde, who was the president for 43 years. He used to say, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I really resonate with that so much, because we are always sprinting in animal sheltering. We're like putting out fires and grabbing and hoarding cases, and we're trying to meet the needs of the public. And we're now we have Pan-LUC, and like it's just, there's so much going on. But when we really want to make sustainable change, we have to have the foundation in place. And so that is what we're doing right now, especially from the behavior perspective. Michelle, I saw you pop on. Do you want to say anything, or you're just, okay, showing us your lovely face? Okay. So a few things I want to talk about before we talk about animal behavior is human behavior. We are complex and messy beings. And unfortunately, our brains are, I sort of have a suggestion box to our brains to sort of stop operating from this negativity bias. We're really good at this. We are really good at scanning the environment and going, that's not safe. That's not safe, right? Or like, that's uncomfortable. That's uncomfortable. And this is a survival mechanism that our brains have. And it works for us, right? We learn things and then we don't do them again. And this particular mechanism keeps us really safe. The problem is with this mechanism is that when we look at things through a negativity bias, we are just focusing on the negative things in the environment, and we're forgetting, or we're not even forgetting, we're like missing the other perspectives in the environment. And it takes like a conscious effort to go, I know that my brain works that way. Instead of me harping on the one thing, instead of me harping that I got sick on this trip, right? I am going to focus on the fact that we can do this training live. on Zoom. I'm going to focus on the fact that I was able to be on site with the team and volunteers Monday through Thursday of last week, right? Like I'm going to consciously focus on the things that are going well. Instead of focusing on the one dog that we decided to euthanize, I'm going to focus on the 40 adoptions we did last week, right? It does take a conscious effort, and the way your brain operates, it is working against that. And so I wanted to bring this up because I think it's important for us to know that we have, when we're operating from a negativity bias, what happens is that we get what are called cognitive distortions. And there's a lot of different types of cognitive distortions. Some you see here, like mind reading or labeling or magnification or magical thinking, negative thinking. And this happens a lot. I cannot tell you how many times I have personally been in my own shelter and reading notes about an animal and been like, oh, why didn't she do A, B, and C? Immediately go to this place of, who can I blame? This is uncomfortable for me. Who can I blame? That's just what we do as human beings. How can I move away from the discomfort and move towards alleviation or feeling relief? Who can I blame? Either myself or someone else. And this level of cognitive distortion can be really challenging and toxic, and happens in sheltering. I see it over and over and over again. Especially because we're over threshold a lot in sheltering. We are, like I said, putting out fires, and we care deeply about the work that we're doing, whether you're staff or volunteers. And so it's easy to sort of go to this place of like, well, she doesn't care about what I think, right? Or why does he work here if he doesn't want to save all the animals? Or she's conservative when she makes euthanasia decisions, right? Or if we euthanize this dog, we're going to euthanize them all, right? Like we sort of jump to these bottom line, black or white thoughts that can really impact our behavior. And this is something that I talk a lot about with my pet parents and whoa, I don't know what that noise was. But this is a lot of what I talk about with my pet parents, is that if we have a specific thought, and we keep thinking that thought, that's going to impact our behavior. And then our behavior is going to be a representation of that thought. And so the invitation tonight is really to have the mindset, and this is something I remind myself every day. So I am not like, I have not arrived to this place, but that everybody's doing the best with the tools that they have in that moment, right? Like everybody is struggling in a variety of different ways. Everybody is trying the best that they can. It might not be the way you defined best, or it might not be how you would have handled it, but it is the best that they're doing with the tools that they have in that moment. I think that's so critical because, as we talked about all last week with staff and volunteers, that behavior and emotions are fluid. And so again, like I'm doing my best before I have my coffee and after my coffee, like those might be two different bests, right? And so it's important that we have this mindset, and it is important that we, excuse me, that we get curious with one another. We don't get curious in a way like, well, why didn't you do that? It's not that. Like I call that curiosity versus curiosity. What I mean by that is we're not asking loaded questions. Right? We're asking questions like, hey, I'm really having a hard time understanding why we made this pathway decision for this animal, and we made this pathway decision for this animal. Can you help me understand that? Because I'm having a hard time, right? That's taking ownership of how we're feeling. And you still get access to the information that you need, but you do it through the lens of curiosity and the mindset that everybody is trying the best that they can. One of the things that we talked about last week was that animals, one of the ways in which they learn is through operant conditioning, or learning by consequence. And the acronym is ABC, or antecedent behavior consequence. The antecedent is something that happens in the environment that cues the behavior to happen. So like you pull out your leash and your dog could do a variety of behaviors. They could hide if they don't like to be walked, or they could run to the door and start jumping up, right? So the antecedent is the leash is presented. The behavior is the dog sits. The consequence is the dog gets to go for the walk. The antecedent cues the behavior to happen. The consequence increases or decreases the behavior moving forward. Okay. This is just like a 2-minute crash course in applied behavior analysis. But this is important for us too, because if the antecedent is I'm experiencing a hardship, like I'm having a hard day and I'm like, oh, and now I'm seeing, that this animal struggling in the kennel, my immediate behavior might be to blame and react. And the consequence is I might actually feel a little bit better and feel like I got some access to control when I was feeling out of control, right? This is like, if we're blaming and reacting to people or towards ourselves, and we continue doing that behavior, there is a consequence that is working for us. The behavior is getting reinforced. And usually it is like blowing off steam or like getting access to a sense of control. But I want to invite you all to use that judgment as a cue for a replacement behavior. This is what we do for dog training or cat training. My clients go, I don't like this behavior. Okay, great. What do you want them to do instead? What's the replacement behavior? So next time you're experiencing a hardship and you're like, ooh, I want to blame and I want to react. Okay, Marissa said I need a replacement behavior. Get curious, assume the best intent, right? You might still get access to some element of control because you're like, okay, I can do something with this energy. You might feel better. You might get answers and you might get a level of connection that everybody is really dying for right now. And so my invitation for everyone is that like, we're all doing the best that we can. When we notice some reactivity within us, the same way that we notice reactivity within cats and dogs, when we notice that reactivity within us, can that be the cue for us to go, okay, assume the best intent, get curious. This is, again, something I have not arrived to. Depending on the context, it's going to be hard for me. But this is something that we should all strive for so that we can treat each other with the utmost respect, because that is in one of those 8 tenets that we do that to one another. Okay. So we're going to move on to a few terms and talk a little bit about what we've been doing together as a team. So open admissions, I've already talked about this, is that it's defined as a shelter that's taking in anything that comes to their doors. Usually they have an animal control contract, and they are supporting the community in that way. And right now I mentioned we're in a managed admission phase because we're trying to control the flow of animals that are coming in order to support the current population of animals and staff and volunteers as well. Another term that's important to know is capacity for care. So capacity for care is taking a look at all your resources, the time in the day, because there's finite resources there, your staff, your volunteers, the number of animals, the number of kennels, taking a look at all of that and determining when are you in your green zone? When are you operating within your capacity for care? When are you in your yellow and when are you in your red? And what are the things that we can do to prevent moving to yellow or red? And if we do get to yellow, how do we get back down to green? And if we get to red, how do we get back down to yellow and then to green? So leadership's in the process of developing an SOP right now and a standard operating procedure to really make sure that we have all that information so that what are all of the efforts that we're taking when we are beyond our capacity for care? And this organization is already doing that. Like that's what managed admissions is. That's what Couch Crashers was. Let's get these animals out of the facility, right? How can we ask our partners for help? How can we do a ton of adoption promotions? So they're already doing this, but we wanted to put a framework around it so that we can really prevent what was happening several months ago with like just way more animals in care than we even had kennels for. So that SOP is not fully written yet, but will be launching soon. Pathway planning is when we are determining the animal's flow throughout the building. We're taking into consideration their home history, shelter observations. We're doing a risk assessment from a safety perspective. We're looking at our capacity for care and our existing resources. Some possible pathways, say that 5 times fast. Some possible pathways are, and I'm looking at this through the lens of behavior, are adoption with recommendations or restrictions. So going to a single cat household, or not going to a home without children or something like that. Adoption with adoption process modification, which is where we are adopting cats and dogs out from office locations. So making sure that, if they meet specific criteria, which we have launched, we're going to be launching an SOP this week that details this, who gets enrolled in that program and how can we support their adoption from a different location because they're not showing well in the kennels. The couch crasher is a possible pathway to get the animal some reprieve from the shelter. Transfer and foster are also options as well, but they are limited resources. And then, like I mentioned earlier, euthanasia is a possible outcome. So at time of intake, we want to be able to be gathering as much information about the animal as possible. And so what we've done is recently we've launched new owner surrender finder. Yes, new owner surrender and finder intake forms for both cats and dogs. These forms are lengthy, and the admissions team is being so great about asking patrons to fill out all this information. But we're getting way better behavior information than we were before, or not better, but like more thorough behavior information than we were before. So we're really excited about that process. And this way we can help find a nice pathway for that animal and be able to say, your ideal home might look like something like this based off of your home history. We're also taking a look at the animal's observation, behavior observations at time of intake, knowing that's a stressful time. That's just a sliver of their personality and who they are. And then we're also taking a look, how do they behave or respond to handling and engagement with their handlers during time of the physical exam with the vet services team. Because in general, as an industry and Hawaiian Humane, we're moving away from behavior assessments. So a behavior assessment is a standardized test where we expose an animal to specific stimuli in a sequential order to see their response. And we're really doing away with that because it's just a snapshot of that animal's behavior, just a moment in time. And like I said before with the coffee example, if you snapshot me before my coffee and you snapshot me after, I will behave differently. And so it's important that instead of just doing a behavior assessment, we're gathering information about the animal throughout their entire stay and as much home history as possible, because home history is the best predictor of what they're going to be like in the next home. And so it's important that we're gathering as much information as possible about the animal, again, at time of intake and during their stay. We still will do dog introductions just so that we can see what dogs are like with other dogs. And we've developed criteria of who we're going to be testing and how we're going to be testing them to set them up for success. We're not going to be doing handling assessments so much anymore, because if an animal is struggling with some sort of handling that needs to be done, like let's say a medical procedure, we're going to troubleshoot that instead of like exposing them to an assessment so that they can engage in the problematic behavior. We don't want to set them up to fail. We want to be able to, again, take every moment as the animal's behaving, let's listen to them and then let's set them up for success as best we can. So this is just a comprehensive list of some shelter observations, like time of intake, like I mentioned, staff and volunteers. Your observations are critical. We are meeting this week to talk about what are some other ways that we can capture all of your information when you're engaging with these animals, besides the information that's on the whiteboard right now. So you are the eyes and ears of the shelter, and we want to be able to hear your observations. And so we're going to be talking about that. So stay tuned for that. And here are some other shelter observations: approaching the kennel, entering the kennel, engaging with patrons, engaging with another animal, walking throughout the building, right? All of these shelter observations are critical for us.
Looks like we might have some technical difficulties, so we'll try to get Marissa back. Hang in with us. Thanks, everyone. Marissa is logging back on. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I thought the meeting ended and it wasn't me. And then Natalie's like, "It's you, my friend." I'm like, okay. I am back. I have to say, testing my patience this week. Good thing I'm like at the beach, right? Like there's that. Okay, let me share my screen. Where did you lose me? You lost me at pathway planning tools, I'm sure. Correct? Yes. Okay, so what I was saying was that we decided as a team that we're going to launch these tools to staff first, get them comfortable using them, because it's a lot of information for them to digest this week before we figure out how we're going to share and disseminate this information with volunteers. But what I'm so excited about these pathway planning tools, because behavior is gray, super gray. there's no blood test, there's no diagnostics, right? We can't just be like, okay, this is not treatable. And so I've designed these tools in order to help us think critically about what we're placing up for adoption and what we're not placing up for adoption. And it really tries to take into risk assessment into play, and it really tries to take into consideration that behavior is really nuanced. And so I've launched these tools with other organizations, and the feedback so far has been, it's a lot to digest. And wow, I finally feel like we have some clarity. Like I finally feel like I can see the animal in this tool. I can see the individual case in this tool. And now we have come to a thoughtful decision. And the other feedback that I have gotten is that if I'm, and I'm just, because I see Beth's beautiful face. If Beth and I are talking about a case, and Beth is like, yeah, I am having a really hard time. Why did we not place this dog up for adoption or this cat up for adoption? Beth and I can together, side by side as a team, look at the tool and talk about the case through the lens of the tool. And I have seen over the past few years how that has helped people come together, stand side by side, review, looking at using the same language to talk about a case versus standing in front of one another without the tool and being somewhat combative or this is my opinion, this is your opinion, right? So it has really helped a lot of organizations come together in how we're talking about cases. And so that's my hope for Hawaiian Humane as well. So we're rolling these out this week. We're really excited about it. One of the things that we are implementing as well is something called priority review. So this is a process where specific animals that meet the criteria will be placed on priority review stage. They're not going to be on behavior eval request anymore. That's a particular stage that sort of just everything that was behavior related got moved to. Animals are going to be on priority review, and then leadership from all different departments will meet daily to discuss those animals and figure out pathways for those animals. Staff should be looking at the pathway planning tools to make those decisions to prevent them from going on priority review. However, we want everyone to feel comfortable to be able to say, hey, I'm having a hard time making this pathway decision for this animal. I really need help from management or whomever to help me. And that's what priority review is going to be. The beautiful thing I've seen when we have multiple departments talking together is we get creativity around what could be done for this animal. We get like a organization-wide understanding of resources that are available. We get multiple different perspectives and lenses about the animal. And we get departments talking to each other, which is so critical. Because everything, especially when you're big like Hawaiian Humane, everything can be operated in a silo. And that's where assumptions and those cognitive distortions start brewing, like when we're operating in silos and not talking to one another. So we're really excited about priority review, and we're really excited about having staff potentially sit in on this meeting so that people understand how we're making decisions really thoughtfully and really carefully. And then another thing, I love to see the animals in the boxes. Another thing that we have talked about is, and we designed some SOPs around what are the baseline behavior interventions that Hawaiian Humane is already doing? How can we just draw some lines in the sand and say, this is what we're doing, and then get really good at it, and then move on to possible other interventions. So Hawaiian Humane is committed to a toy and fresh bedding in each kennel, changing kennel locations if they're not working for the animal, like cat reactivity or dog reactivity, visual barriers, office decompression, so having animals in offices. You all volunteers are part of our baseline behavior interventions. We could not do the work that we do without you. We're implementing a calm down stage, which is allowing the animal to get a hands-off approach and get access to a really quiet, calm kennel so they can habituate or get used to their environment. The couch crashers is a baseline intervention. Let's get that dog out of the shelter and give their cortisol a break. Feel Away and Adaptil, which are synthetic pheromones that are used to reduce stress. Treat boxes for dogs and access to treats for cats. Calming music to support their nervous systems. We're also going to be doing an enrichment pilot program for specific dogs in adoption that will be identified that are really having a hard time being kenneled. We're going to be doing additional in-kennel enrichment for them. That's going to be run by adoption staff members and adoption volunteers. And then West Oahu will be considered a sort of an intervention in the sense that, like, let's get maybe new adopter eyes on this animal. Let's transfer them over, or let's transfer cats over there because cats are not being housed in the middle of dogs, right? So that is going to be a great intervention that we can utilize once that campus is available. So again, we could do a lot more, and this is such a great start and a really great foundation to really celebrate. There are some organizations that don't have half this list. And so it is really important for us to celebrate the work that's already being done, and to really understand and get our foundation in a really good place before we add on additional programming. So that concludes tonight's presentation. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'm also happy for Natalie and Michelle or anyone else. I think Jenny popped on too, to add anything as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marissa. So yeah, we'd love to open up Q&A. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A button, which you can go ahead and start typing your questions in there, and we will get those answered. So please feel free to start. And while you're doing that, I do, again, just want to really thank Marissa for her just collaboration, her expertise, and just being a great partner for us over these past several months. And we're just so privileged to have her here. And I hope for those of you on campus, we'll be able to meet her and chat, and really excited for the work that we've been doing, but also, kind of what this next phase looks like for us and for our team as well. So it looks like we have some questions coming in. So we have a question about a copy of this presentation. And yes, so we are recording it, obviously. So we will send that link out. So for those of you that would like to, you can watch it again. I think sometimes that initial, viewing is kind of, you're absorbing it, but, want to get more into it, we can certainly do that. And so we'll send that out, and so you have that link. Usually it stays live for about a month or so. So you'll have that opportunity to watch at that point. And we'll share with everyone who attended, but also with our volunteers to take a look at that. So we have a great question here. So the question here is, are the baseline interventions available to all animals? And Marissa can answer that, but I can answer it as well. And the answer is yes. As Marissa was sharing, not every baseline intervention is going to be appropriate for every animal. So as an example, couch crashers, right? That currently is not an intervention for cats. And it's not an intervention for younger dogs and puppies. So that is specific to adult dogs, and specific to dogs that we know struggle in the shelter environment. So if appropriate, absolutely. But perhaps, that particular animal would benefit from office decompression, which we do regularly. So great question there. And that is, at this point, the last of our questions. So anyone else have any questions, please feel free to put that in the chat. I see a question actually in our chat, not in the Q&A, but I'll go ahead and answer this as well. So the question was around foster families. So are foster families able to meet the family that is adopting a pet to help provide them tips, info on the pet? So, I will share that that's not a process that we have sort of widespread. That is something that a lot of our foster families will participate in terms of, let's say you have a dog in your care that is just doing fabulously, and you have a friend or a neighbor or family member who'd like to adopt that dog. We would absolutely love your assistance with facilitating that. But that particular facilitation is going to be with you and a member of the public, as an example. But our foster care team can absolutely support with those types of interactions. If you have friends and family who want to adopt your foster. It's a great question. All right. Any other questions in the Q&A? So I have a question here. Looks like clarification. So wanting to understand if there will be an avenue for volunteers to add behavioral observations. So I can take that, or Marissa, if you want to start with sort of our conversations thus far.
Yeah. So right this week, I had an opportunity to shadow some volunteers and also to see what some of the processes are on campus, how volunteers are being trained, all of that, what you guys are doing. And so we're sort of, Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to do like an audit of some of the volunteer programs and see where there might be areas of improvement. And I think that some areas of improvement from what I've seen so far, not that anyone's doing anything wrong, but that there's all this information that volunteers have that we as staff members want to know. And so we would like to figure out what that process looks like. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's capturing information at Pet Point. I don't know what it looks like yet, but we are going to be starting those conversations pretty soon. This Wednesday, actually.
Thanks, Marissa. Yeah, so that is something I know we've talked about as an internal team, and now with Marissa here helping us with more of that program assessment on site. That's something that we'll just have more intel to move forward of what that looks like, and templates and that type of thing. So we do know that there needs to be a framework for that. We don't have it in place just yet because we're launching a lot of this to our team members now, and then that will be extended to volunteers to a certain extent. So great question. I have another question here, and this was, I believe, more around certainly related to socially conscious sheltering, but also for us, how are the needs of a community identified? And I love that question because it's a
question is so great because it is like, it's layered. I think so. Some of the ways that I work with organizations to identify that is, one, partnering with human service organizations within your community to see what they're observing are the needs of your community. Partnering with other rescues or shelters. It's limited on the island, right? In this case, but in Colorado, we all talk to one another all the time to see like what are the different needs of different communities. And let's say, can we transfer and all of that. So really being like having conversations with your partners, both in the human service sector and then also in the animal services. It's also noticing what why are animals like what are the trends you're seeing? What are the types of animals people want to adopt? What are the types of animals people are shying away from? Why are they shying away from having those conversations with your community? Are there programs that need to be created in order to support? Why are people giving animals up? Right? What are some of the systemic people concerns, like whether that's housing or whether that's landlord issues and things of that nature, and then really asking your community, asking your constituents. I know some shelters have done surveys, but can be a limited response. It doesn't really encapsulate everybody, but it is a really great start. So these are some of the ways that we try to understand the needs of community. It is really talking, collaborating, gathering information, not just through the lens of your shelter, but also the other organizations within your community. Natalie, you want to add anything to that?
No, that's fantastic. Thank you. We have another question here, unrelated to this presentation, but a good one. So when do you foresee the West Oahu campus opening? Fantastic question. I'm sure something on everyone's minds, and hopefully everyone here has also received the form and questionnaire to indicate your interest for volunteering at West Oahu, which we would love to see so many of you there. So we are slated to open at the end of April. And we have a grand opening event for the public at that time. More details will be shared there, but our teams will be on that campus training and the like as soon as we're able to occupy that space, which looks like towards the middle of March. So very, very soon. And hopefully a lot of you have seen the hiring fairs and a lot of that activity that we've been ramping up. So that is all, it's all happening, and it's all happening very soon. And we're super excited. And we will share more as we get a bit closer to that. But right now it looks like the end of April. So great question.
So exciting.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I think it looks like the questions have sort of tapered off. So if you do have other questions, anything that comes to mind, always feel free to reach out to our internal team, me, Michelle, Jenny, Christina, Sarah, volunteer at Hawaiian Humane, if that's easier for you. Happy to hear feedback and get your questions and hopefully be able to answer those. And again, we will be sharing this presentation as well with everyone who attended and those that weren't able to make it tonight. But yeah, wanted to just thank Marissa again and really appreciate everyone for taking some time out this evening to learn more and to be involved with us. We truly appreciate it. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Rest of your evening. Awesome. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.